If you've ever wanted to have your own randomizer to appear on your screen, and you were just like, man, I always have to settle for somebody else having to make it and everything, guess what? You don't have to worry about that anymore. I've got the solution for you. I've actually built in OBS Studio and in Streamer.bot the ability for you to actually create your own randomizer, customize it however you want, and guess what? No coding is required whatsoever. So let me show you how we actually break this down so you can make your own randomizer. Now, one of the first things you want to do is you want to go ahead and start setting up everything in OBS, basically how you want it to be. Now, the important thing to note with this is the fact that when you start putting in image files or text files, whatever you're wanting to display as what's getting flipped through, what you're going to need to do is make sure those are named exactly what you want them to come up as in your Twitch chat or YouTube chat, whichever you choose. But essentially, you're going to want to make sure that these are made in a way that you can tell exactly what it is just by looking at it. So what you're going to notice here is that on the image files, I have it labeled as Lexington Stables, Sahara Dunes, Palmetto Coast. These are golf course names, and I'm not a golfer. But Vinny Blanc is who asked me to make a randomizer for him and asked me if it was possible. So while I was live on Twitch during one of my streams, I was like, you know what? Let's see if we can figure this out without having to code. And to my surprise, I actually figured it out. Once you get everything in OBS set to where it looks good, it's pretty, how you want it to be, that's when we can start really developing what you need to do in Streamer.bot. So the first thing that I want to cover here when it comes to setting up Streamer.bot is how you're going to determine what gets turned on and flip through rapidly, and then how are you going to turn it off? So first off, I put together one that I call Random On Golf Randomizer, and this is basically, it's going to choose at random a source that it's going to turn on, and then it will follow with an action that will turn everything off, making sure all of those images are off, and you don't have to worry about, well, what's the last image that appeared, and flipping back and forth. Now, this is how I pretty much set up anytime I want to bring some kind of random image or random text onto the screen. It's just an easy way to put this together. So the first thing I do is I put all the visibility states of each one of my image sources here. So I make sure that, hey, we're in the scene that it's going to be on. I then choose the source that is going to be one of the ones that I want to pop up. And I'm going to do it for each one of those video sources. Then we're going to group them all into a folder. And if you've never done this before, you right click, you're going to come down to where it says add group. And that's basically going to create a folder. So when you have this folder, you just grab and you drop down and you just do where it has that arrow pointing to it, and then it's going to be inside the folder. And you basically just put all those actions inside the folder. So once you have all that you need in that folder, what you're going to do is on the folder itself, if you close it down, this will make it easier, but right click on the folder. Then you're going to scroll down and click random. So by putting everything in a folder and then right clicking and going to random, what you're doing is you're telling Streamer.bot, any one of these I want you to activate. This is how you can randomize a lot of things without having to code and not worry about, having to try and figure out, how am I going to randomize things? How am I going to make things a little bit more interesting and a little more unpredictable? Now, one of the things you can do is in those actions themselves, when you open the folder, you click on one with the right click, you can scroll down and there's the thing called wait. And when you have scrolled down here to where it says wait, which is towards the bottom, if you click on it, it's going to come up with this panel. And basically on this, it's saying that between the value of 0 and 1, you are applying basically a percentage, and your percentage is a decimal value. So, if you've done basic math, you know what you're doing here. But if you wanted to have one thing appear more than the other, you can set these values for each one of the things within that folder and make sure that it is easy to figure out. And just for an example, on my Nerdcast battlers that I typically have running on my stream and gets redeemed quite often, one of the ways I've achieved this is I've put all these actions within a folder, so it will randomly choose one of the actions. This way I have a common card, uncommon, rare, legendary, and Ultima. Now, if I go down on the Ultima, you will see that I have weighted it for a 10% chance for somebody to achieve that. Where if we look at the common, you have a 30% chance. And I calculated this out to make sure that each one of these is a little harder to get to the higher the tier it is. By weighting things this way, you can then create a very wide array of making different things within Streamer.bot and randomizing it to make sure that it's harder to get one specific thing than it is to get another. So it makes it to where people maybe want to engage with a channel point redemption or want to get in on this giveaway, or however you're putting these kinds of things together. So once you have all these randomized, you're going to just add a small delay. The smallest you can go is 10 milliseconds, and it'll make it really, really fast as it goes through, or you can increase that time, but I have found that 50 milliseconds and less is probably the best to show this randomization in a more fluid way. Now, what you're going to do then is you're going to be setting up another action, and this is going to turn everything off. And basically what you can wind up doing is going over here, right-clicking on the one you're working on. You just hit the duplicate. Then once you duplicate, you're just going to double-click on the duplicate, and you're going to rename it. I name this one All Off Golf Randomizer, telling me basically that this is going to turn every single one of those sources off. And then the sub-actions in here, what we're going to do is we would right-click on the folder, and we're going to make sure the random is turned off, because we want to make sure every single one of these does get turned off. So once we have randomization off, everything in this folder is going to happen. So all I've done is go into each one of these, double-click, and I change the visibility state from visible to hidden. And I do that for each one. Do another delay for 10 milliseconds, which I had the first time, and then I have the on randomizer. Essentially what you're doing here is you're setting up an infinite loop where it's going to just continually go and go and go, and it will never end, which kind of causes a problem. How do you end it then? We now have to create the way of how this is going to start, how it's going to stop, and go from there. So the next thing I put together is basically the main action of this, which is going to be the actual running of this action. Now, the first thing that I'm going to put here is actually an action state. And that's going to be in core, actions, set action state. Here you'll just set what action you need to turn on. In this case, I am turning on the off. Now I know this is sounding a little weird right now. It'll make sense as we go. But basically what we need to do is have a way to stop that infinite loop. And the best way to stop the infinite loop is to disable an entire action. Because if we did it the other way and we had it turn off the random on, what would happen is all the offs are going to basically be enabled, and it's not going to show a result. It's going to be blank. So we need to make sure it's the off that gets stopped to where whatever random one pops on stays on. So we make sure that we have this enabled to begin our action. I put a small delay here just to make sure that that enable state does work the way we need it to. The next thing you're gonna notice here is a timer, which you might be wondering, why would you need a timer? And this is why we're gonna be using a timer, is because if you were to put an action in there, the action of starting the, randomizer where it goes into that infinite loop. The problem is if you run an action within another action, the action won't complete until whatever's nested in there will actually complete. So if you have an infinite loop, then yeah, it's not going to stop ever. That action will then be in a permanent state of running because the action you called upon that is in this infinite loop will never stop. It will never progress past this turn on point. So the workaround then is to set up a timer to take over that responsibility. So then when we would go up to our settings and we go over to our timed actions, what you're gonna see here is I have one called, the trigger golf randomization. Basically what I'm doing with this is I'm saying I want, after 1 second, I want you to trigger something. And that's all we needed to do is, hey, once 1 second goes by, you activate this action and boom, we're done. So what am I going to be triggering here? Well, what we're going to be triggering is on the random on, we have put this trigger of the timed action in there, the golf randomizer trigger. And this then makes it to where the timer turns on the infinite loop, not your action itself. This way, we turn on a timer and everything can still progress down the list without getting caught in the infinite loop. So now that we have our way of avoiding getting stuck in the infinite loop within this action itself by using a timer, I set up a delay for the exact same amount of time. This way, I can make sure that when this starts, everything else kicks off at the exact same time. So the first thing that's going to happen is I have the nested scene appear. Now, what you're gonna do by inserting it into a scene, this is basically scene nesting. And if you have no idea how scene nesting works, let me give you a quick demonstration with my setup. And trust me, it's a little bit ridiculous because I built a lot of stuff. Okay, so here in my personal OBS that I use to stream with, what I've got is I have something that I call the widget. It's the Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Now, this is where chat can come in and be like, hey, I want to fight somebody else in chat, and it's a Rock'em Sock'em Robots. One robot will punch the head off the other. It's literally randomly chosen who's going to win. It's a 50-50 split. But with this, what I've done is I built it into one scene. I have all the sources that are in there with, the names, the profile pictures, and, well, the actual video file that would appear, well, right in here if it was active and not in studio mode. But everything is built within one scene. So what do I do with this scene to make sure that it's actually going to appear where I want it to appear? Well, that's where we scene nest. And so here I have actually built something that I call my reaction scene. So anything that is channel points or commands or anything that is triggered by the chat that is interactive and fun, that is not based on alerts or some other tool, I have my own way of putting these together. But what I do is in the reaction scene then, I put all these different widgets I build, all these different scenes of things that I put in here. And what I then do is have where I turn those scenes on or off within the reaction scene. And this way, when I put the reaction scene anywhere in my OBS Studio, it's going to trigger no matter what. I don't have to worry about saying, well, it needs to trigger individually in my just chatting screen or in my gameplay screen, and I have to put both of those in there. No, you just put it in a reaction scene. Everything then you can trigger the turn on in the reaction scene to make sure it's not eating up all the computing cycles, because that is one thing. The more you build, the more these can eat up all of your CPU, GPU usage, even your RAM. It's because of experience. I had one thing that was eating so much processing up that it literally bogged down my stream. It bogged down everything on my PC. So with this, we are enabling the scene itself to then turn on. Then we do pick a random number between 5,000 and 13,000, which seems stupid high, but it'll make sense. So to get a random number, you just do core, you go to logic, and it's gonna be here on get random number. Now the reason why we have 5,000 and 13,000 is because when you come down here for delay, our delay that we are setting for how long this is going to run, essentially. With the delay, you can insert variables, and the variable you get from generating a random number is %random number %. That is your variable you can insert here. This way, you can choose a random amount of time that it's going to run. So now we have it set in milliseconds for either 5 seconds or to 13 seconds. Anywhere in there becomes the number that you're going to wait. Then once that delay ends, it's going to turn off the randomizer. It's going to turn off that infinite loop right here. It'll turn red. It will stop on a specific image for then you to determine what wins. Then we also disable the timer, just that way it enters a reset to where we can, use it again when we need to. Now here's the fun part. This is where we can then start going, okay, if something wins, we want to send the name of that to Twitch chat. This way we can put in Twitch, this is what is chosen. This is why it's important when you build this in OBS, if you're using text sources or you're using image files, that when it's flipping through, these are named a very specific way. Let me show you why. So here we have something called OBS Get Scene Item Properties. Now this you can do by just going to OBS, you're going to go down to where it says scenes, and then you're going to get scene item properties. And it'll appear with this box. You choose the scene that it's in, and you choose the source that you want to get the properties of. So in this case, we're going to start with the Bahama Isles, which we do here. Then we do logic, your if-else statement. This is basically saying if it equals this, then we're going to do something else. So in my logic, I have where it says the variable is called props visible. Props.visible. What does that mean? Well, what we're getting from the scene item properties is saying if we get this one value that out of all the ones we're requesting, if the props visible equals true, if it's the one that is on, then we're going to run an action. Otherwise, just don't do anything and move to the next one. Now, if you're wondering where I figured out where to get these variables from, it's very simple. You go to docs.streamer.bot. This is basically all the documentation on Streamer.bot and will literally tell you what is going to populate when you use something. So what you would do is you'd go to API and sub-actions. In the sub-actions, since this is an OBS Studio sub-action that we're using, we're going to use OBS Studio. It'll bring us down. Now, where did we find it? Was it in an uncategorized? Is it filters? This is actually where we got it from scene item properties right here. So when I click on this, it's going to give you all the information of what it does and its parameters. And I know this may seem confusing, but trust me when I say this is not as hard as you think. Because if you come down here to variables, this is what you can use anytime you put this particular sub-action into your action altogether. So because we have this, we would have access to bounds.x, bounds.y. You can set then the bounding box limits if you use bounding boxes to make sure that the transforms are going to fit in a specific way. You could actually set them through a variable this way. You can even set where the position X and Y would be. You can then tell it where it's going to sit anywhere on the screen or just change the rotation. But what we're looking for is right here, props name, and it's going to give you the scene item name. So when we're talking the scene item name, it's literally what you named it right here in your scene. So again, whatever you name this is the property we are getting from the get scene item properties. So if it's visible and it's true, we're going to do chat golf course name. This is another action we're going to make. And literally all that's in chat golf course name is a Twitch message. And the only thing I put in here for now is literally the name of the scene item. And so when we run this, it pops up in your Twitch chat. This is what was chosen. This is the scene item that is visible. And so what you do is you basically apply this logic to each one of these. So on your logic, if this equals true, run this and then stop because you reached the one you needed to be at. This is the one that's visible. This is it. We don't need to go any further. However, if Bahama Islands was not the right one, well, okay, don't do anything. Go to the next one. 50 millisecond delay. Again, we're going to get scene item properties, but this time we're going to get a different one. So if the first one wasn't the one that was active, let's move on to the next one in line. And we do the same thing here. If props visible equals true, then do the chat golf course name. Basically, send that information into the Twitch message. And if it's true, cool, break, stop. We don't need to go any further. However, if it's false, if it's not the one that is active, forget it. Just do nothing and continue on to the next one. And you just repeat this cycle all the way down through the entire list of anything that's going to pop up on your screen to where the last thing you have here is the last one that's in line. And again, you do the same thing as you've done before. However, if none of these popped up for some reason and you still continue and it just ends the action, then you messed up somewhere. You might want to go back and look. So now when I click on just the test button to run the start golf randomizer, basically let's start this whole action, it's literally going to do everything that we put in. So now it's going, it's determining it all. Voila, Sahara Dunes was the one that was chosen. And then in my Twitch chat, it did come up saying Sahara Dunes because that is what I named it down here. And no joke, that's it. You have now created a randomizer. I mean, this is how you can essentially put together a randomizer without having to code whatsoever. So if you've ever thought, man, I've always wanted one, but I always wanted to customize it myself, guess what? Now you can do it. Congratulations. So, I mean, I hope this helps you guys. I hope this gives you something that you were really desperate to have. If you're looking for more information on how to set stuff up without having to code whatsoever, follow this channel. Subscribe to me because I guarantee you I'm always going to come up with some way to give you guys an avenue to find what you're looking for, at least in a basic way, until maybe someday you learn how to code and you can make it more advanced and more interesting. But hey, I'm learning how to do that myself. I'm learning how to code. It's a slow process. It sometimes makes me want to push my head into a wall, but I make it happen. Now, if you have any questions or you're having any struggles, you can always ask down below in the comments. I will respond, or just hop into my Discord server. We are always answering questions on how to accomplish things in Streamer.bot or help you diagnose issues you might be having. So, hope this helps you guys. I hope this is a huge beneficial thing for you, and I will see you all on the next video. Have a great time streaming, my friends.